Kalispera. Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the Freie Universität Berlin, the Centrum Modernes Griechenland, and Dr. Konstantinos Kosmas for inviting me to this tribute to Petros Markaris. It's really a pleasure and an honor. When you think of the extraordinary success of Petros Markaris in Italy, you might wonder why other Greek writers did not take the opportunity to build on his success to make their way in the Italian publishing market. Other than Markaris, in fact, there are no Greek authors in the Italian bookstores, except from some classics, Kazantzakis, and the poets, among which stands out Cavafy almost alone. Successful writers of other nations often pay the way with their work for their country's literatures, allowing to be known abroad. But this has not happened with Markaris. This might seem strange because Greece does not lack writers, whether mystery writers or writers of other genres. And it's also a fact that publishers continue to explore proposals that come from Greece, something I know because I'm often involved in reading and selecting the works. Italian publishers are willing to find Greek writers because they know they could rely on a pool of readers that might be interested to read something that comes from some country of Markaris, a beloved author. However, they eventually give up. Why does this happen? My answer is simple, at least from the publisher point of view, because Markaris is really different from the other Greek writers. The structure of his novel is different. The use of language, the narrative economy, it has the rate at which the episodes follow one another, the way the characters are constructed, the type and quality of humor. Markaris doesn't not have disciples in Greece, because after all, Petros Markaris is not a Greek writer, as he seemed to have nothing in common with the Greek writers, neither readings nor references, let alone his aims. Markaris' language is essential, fast, elegant, but its elegance is linear, discrete. Markaris' plots are not mere literary excuses, but the substances of his narration. Culture and reflection run through his novel, but rather than coming across as ostentatious, it is as though they dissolved in the plot, in the dialogues, in the detail. Dissolve, but still remain perceivable. Markaris' pace is relentless and always straight to the point. There are no digressions, breaks, losses, or uncertainties. Markaris' humor is at times politically incorrect, but always quick, with a fast-paced and effective rhythm. Whereas the books that Greek publishers send to Italy usually show the contrary. Pompous writing, fraught with digressions, clever sometimes, but inconclusive, verbose, filled with comments which threaten you with a symbolism, metaphors, digressions, with bravura, with that arty prose, and so on. Oh my gosh, help me. How many times, considering a Greek book, it occurred to me and to my colleagues to think it would not be bad if only it were reduced by half. How many times I said to myself when I was halfway through reading it, too bad. It was going so well, but eventually it got lost. It looked as if many Greek novelists failed to stick to a plot altogether, as they feel compelled to turn their book in an enormous archive of observations and concepts, to the extent of forgetting the story. There is a need to show the reader that they have read so much, that they are intelligent and well educated. But Markaris never does so. That's why publishers and readers love him. I think that he never does so for two reasons. The first is because by working for theater, cinema, and television, he had learned something that to many writers is difficult to accept. The reader is not interested in backstories, in the author's innermost thoughts, nor in his comments. What he likes and wants is the story. The second reason is because Markaris is not a product of the symbolist culture, nor a follower of Parnassians à la Jean Moréa. He does not participate in the outdated idea of organic intellectual that seems to be still at the basis of much Greek literature. This difference has to do with his formation being based on European literature, outside the cultural boundaries of the Greek world. I would like to quote here a post dedicated to Markaris, taken from a very interesting and at the same time funny blog called "Do Not Ever Read Me." I quote, "I am among those who have always disliked the contemporary Greek literature and its fortunes. I do not like anything or anyone among the authors and the readers of the so-called, by myself at least, school of Sotitria de Philo. I think that most of them are scribblers who dream and wait for the right time to become, through some or many insipid books, and with the support of an uneducated press, the satraps of the culture of this hapless country." And then he continues, "Every time I read a mystery novel, I think about what Hileas Kyriakidis said to one of his good friends, Mrs. X, who had given him a manuscript to read. He read it, and among other things, said that detective story is the best vehicle for a social analysis. It is very unlikely that Kyriakidis did not think of Petros Markaris, whose novel have a beginning, a middle, and an end, something that is not granted today in Greece. Are enjoyable, fun, but by no means trivial. In my humble opinion, the diversity of Markaris from the other Greek writers is due to the fact that he is a Greek of the diaspora. Something that to me seems obvious because every time I happen to read some Greek of the diaspora writer, I found this very simple yet very rich approach to literature. Let me make just three examples. The first is Maria Iordanidu. I have translated 1,000 years ago her gorgeous Loxandra, the first volume for a small recherche du temps perdu, spanning from the second half of the 19th century through to the 70s in the 20th century. Reading Loxandra, you will find an elegant but unadorned writing, rich in meaning but austere and simple, no frills, effective humor, contempt for the empty talk, an incredible ability to stay attached to the story that is told with a great sense of rhythm. Other signs of an ideal contiguity with Markaris, the Constantinopolitan origin, and a certain indifference, if irritation, on the part of literary critics, who have long stuck up their noses before having to change their minds. And this applies to both writers. The second is the only other Greek crime novelist whose work, in my opinion, may recall Markaris, Theodoros Kalifatidis, who is published by Gavrilidis too. He too is a Greek of the diaspora because he has lived since the age of 26 in Sweden, and now he is 78. He is also a crime writer and has a taut and concrete way of writing. The third writer is Cavafy, whom I mentioned earlier on as one of the few Greek writers appearing on the shelves of Italian bookshops. I'm working on him at this time, and I understand that his poetry is abysmally different from that of Seferis and Elitis, to quote the two Greek novelists, different from that of Ritsos, and of course different from his contemporaries. Cavafy has a view that is not Greek. Maybe you can define it as Hellenistic or Byzantine, but certainly not typical of an Elavitis, a Greek from Greece. He shows a bold use of language, hardly related to the cultural milieu of those pronunciations that were so popular at that time and would then mark Greek poetry in the 17th century, in the 20th century. He shows complexity and conceptual, sentimental, emotional depth in a colloquial but very fine style, at the same time rough and plain. In short, definitely a Greek author, but nourished by the West and with a temperament and feelings of someone who works, thinks, and studies independently and away from unwanted cultural influences. Ioannidou, Cavafis, Markaris, three authors I find consonant in many respects, and which seem to me, despite the enormous differences, to resonate with each other and have something in common. Regarding Markaris, I just finished translating his last collection of short stories, Tri Maria in Greek, which for me is his 11th title I translated. As I said, Markaris is a very fluid and flows smoothly. For me, as a translator, the biggest task lies in preserving his smoothness. This is far from easy though, as Italian and Greek are languages with quite different essence. Italian is a literary language, more stiff. Greek, on the other hand, is a very flexible language with large variations and a certain freedom, both in terms of morphology and of syntax. Now, when I translate, I have two basic aims. The fluidity of the Italian text that must flow smoothly, and the maintenance of the color and rhythm of the original. These aims are at times in contrast. But after all, this is exactly in the solution of these conflicts that lies the beauty of the translator's work. Let me give you a couple of examples. In Italian, the expression "a me mi piace il gelato," "me, I like ice cream," as common as it sounds at least slovenly, if not wrong, especially in a text with a medium-high register. It could certainly be used in a novel, but it would give to the character that use it a vulgar connotation. No teacher or lawyer, for example, would ever say it. In Greek, however, the corresponding phrase «Εμένα μου αρέσει το παγωτό» is perfectly accepted. Here lies a tricky problem for the translator then. Either he gives the text a novelly conversational tone, or he stiffens it. The solution lies in a compensation. I will translate "I like ice cream" and not "me, I like ice cream," but I will also adopt an informal tone in another relevant passage. In short, as Umberto Eco writes in his essay Experiences in Translation, the translation is a negotiation, a deal in which you have to find a compromise, sacrificing a bit of freedom in the process, but recovering it in other conversational indicators. Today, having come to the 11th title featuring Inspector Charitos, It's also important to maintain a degree of consistency with the previous volumes. And then you have to be accurate. For example, I have also translated police car as autopattuglie and not as volante. This choice should be maintained, like many others I have done over time. But I confess that I'd love to review all translations I made and standardize them. For surely I have been changed, perhaps imperceptibly, but also Petros Markaris and Inspector Heritos changed. Time's to stop, because we have to have a pause. So thank you very much for your attention. I would like to greet affectionately Petros Markaris and to extend to him my admired and grateful tribute.